All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Tonight is lesson 6, and we got a special topic for you tonight. It's going to be some teaching plus practice. You're going to be able to take what you've learned and apply it, and you're going to see some wonderful results. Yeah, because we did it this morning, the same thing, and we saw some amazing result this morning. All right, well, the lesson tonight that I want to talk to you about is what do we do when a person can't give up, not just negative emotion, but when they can't give up the stones. You know, we've been talking about stones and letting go of stones. And if you remember some of the numbers that I threw out, 60% of the people we pray with, it's very easy for them to let go. About 30% will be in the medium range. You got to work at it a little bit. And about 10% will be much harder. And I'm going to explain to you. I'm going to show you a picture. And if you understand this picture and you understand the principle behind it, and you apply it to all the other principles that you've been learning, then this whole thing will become very, very easy. So this is a hot air balloon, and I think most of us have seen it at least on television or the movies or something like that. Maybe we haven't ridden on one, but the way the hot air balloon works is this. You know, so if you want the hot air balloons to fly off the ground, then you turn on the fire, and with the hot air, you know, it begins to lift up the balloon. However, let's say if you don't want the balloon to fly away, what you need to do is you throw down something heavy. It could be a sandbag, or it could be tied to a stake, you know, a rope that is tied to a stake, but something heavy, something, you know, to hold it down, right? So this balloon, even though you might have the fire on, with enough sandbags or something heavy, this balloon will not fly away. In the same way, I want to give you an illustration. In the same way, people can let go of negative emotions, but sometimes there are things in their lives that cause it to be weighted down, uh, to be tied down, and they're not able to let go. Let me give you some examples. I remember I was praying for this one man, and he said, I can feel this anger. It's bubbling up inside of me, and it's trying to come up, but it got to my head and it's stuck. I just can't get it out of my head. It's stuck right here in my head. Another lady said, you know, I feel it. I feel it in my stomach, but it won't go out. It's just like stuck in my stomach. So sometimes these stones, the negative emotion, the sin, you know, these things, they get stuck inside of us. We want to let them go, but they can't go. We're just not able to let them go. Why is that? Because there are certain things that hold it down, certain sandbags, something heavy that's holding it from truly leaving us. So, what are those things? What are those things that will hold not just the negative emotion, but the sin, the stones, hold it down so that a person is not able to let go? There are 7 major things, 7 major reasons. They're not the only 7. There are other reasons, but these are the 7 major ones that I have discovered, and we are going to go through them. The first one, if a person is not willing to let go of the stones, guess what? It is not going to go out. Remember the command from Ephesians 4:31, Colossians 3:8, 1 Peter 5:7. You know, the first 2 said, get rid of your anger. The 1 Peter 5:7 said, cast your anxiety upon the Lord. So those commands are given to us, and we have the responsibility. If we are willing, it they should be able to, we should be able to get rid of them. They should be able to go away. But if we're not willing, they are not going to go. And you can't force a person to let go. Sometimes people don't want to let go. Sometimes people are so used to living with that pain, that hurt, the anger, the fear, and it's been a part of their life for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and they don't know how to live without it because they have become accustomed to it. So number one, a person has to be willing. Number two, if the stone is too big, too deep, or too heavy, they just can't let it go. They can't let it go because it's just too much for them. And they said, no, the stone is too much. And that's when I've been teaching you, let's ask the Lord for help. So usually asking the Lord for help and say, Lord, I want to be free. Would you help me? With your help and power, I give it to you. Usually that will do the trick. All right. Number three, if they suppress their emotion, there are different levels of suppressing a person's emotion. And later, after we practice, I will talk to you more about it. But there are different levels of suppressing emotion. Let me explain the first level. This level is something that you can deal with. There are deeper levels which will be much harder. But let me explain the first level first. Sometimes a person will feel the emotion, but then they stop feeling it and they start rationalizing. Let me give you an example. This woman that I was praying for, she had been so angry with her mom. So we were talking about that, and I said, are you willing to let go of the anger? She said, yes. So she started renouncing the anger that she had towards her mom. She said, I'm angry with my mom because when I was a little girl, she was never there for me. Even when I was 5 or 6 years old, there were times I come back from school and nobody's at home. And I had to cook myself, and sometimes I burned myself. And there was time when I locked myself out of the door and I couldn't get back in, and I was outside by myself and I was so scared. I was so afraid. I was so angry with her, but I can't be angry with her because my dad divorced her and she had to work all the way till midnight. So I understand. So no, I'm not angry with her anymore. So she went from the fear and the anger, and then she rationalized. She didn't rationalize when she was a little girl. She rationalized when she became an adult. She started thinking, well, you know, I understand why my mom did what she had to do. So the anger and the fear was no longer there. See, and so they rationalized. There was another man. Again, he was a young boy. I forget exactly how old he was, 7 years old, 8 years old, I don't remember. But he said, I was so angry with my dad. And I said, why? Well, because when I was young, maybe 7 years old, I'm just guessing now, I don't remember. My dad took me fishing, and we were fishing, we were weight fishing, we were fishing in the sea, in the ocean, on the beach. And he would leave me to fish by myself. I was only 7 years old. And he would drive away 1 mile away and he would fish by himself. And I was there all by myself. And sometimes I cut myself and sometimes these things, oh, I was so afraid. And I was so angry with him. But then I can't be angry with him because he loves me. He took me fishing. So I'm not angry with him because he loves me. So both of them, they went from I'm angry, I'm fearful, to I can't be angry because I understand why they did what they did. So there are some people who would suppress their emotion and they would rationalize. So you will have some of these people. And to deal with that, you just, if they do it consistently, and if that's part of the pattern that you see, you just let them know. You said, you know, you have a habit of rationalizing. And I want you to, because, you know, if you're not able to feel the emotion, you're not going to be able to let it go. And you mentioned you want freedom. Can you hold on? Can you feel the emotion before you start rationalizing? Let them know it. And if they can start feeling the emotion again, they will be able to let it go. So that that level, it's, like the initial level of suppression. There are deeper level of suppression. I'm going to talk about that later. All right. A fourth reason, there are connecting stones. What I mean by that is, a person can be angry or they can hate their mother, for example. And there are things that are connected to that anger and hate. For example, maybe the mother had said all kinds of negative words about him. You're so stupid. You're so worthless. Or maybe they put a curse on the mother because the mother did such bad things to them. Say, I wish she would die. Or maybe they have some guilt. Oh, my mother died, and even though I hated her, but I wasn't there. I didn't even go to the funeral. I feel so guilty. So these would be connecting stones. And sometimes it's really hard for them to let go of the anger and the hate, some of the other stone, the negative emotion stone, if they don't deal with the other connecting stones first, or if they might be able to deal with it together. Okay? So some connecting stone, these are examples. Sin, for example, if they hate the person who raped them, they might not be able to let go of that hate until they can deal with the incident of being raped, and you would have to renounce that. All right? So I hope you understand these connecting stones are very vital in helping a person be freed up. And number 5, spiritual or demonic issues. I am going to start talking about that next Monday. Now, when we deal with spiritual deliverance and demonic issues, usually people in the church, Christian, are not interested in this topic. There's only a very small percentage of people who are interested. And they said it's too scary, it's too messy, it's dirty, and people don't want it. They don't want to be involved except for a small, very small percentage. I have good news for you. I have really good news for you. It's actually going to be quite easy dealing with people who have these issues, much easier than you think. And I'm going to explain to you the root issues, the doors behind all of these things. And when you understand it, you'll be able to deal with these issues. Why do we have young people cutting themselves? Why do we have, in Japan, they call them the hikikomoris, the people that would hide themselves, the young people that played with a lot of video games, they become depressed, they hide themselves in rooms, they become antisocial, they sometimes think about committing suicide. Why do we have such problem with homosexuality and transgender nowadays and schizophrenia and bipolar? Well, a lot of which is due to spiritual issues, and I will explain that to you starting Monday. I have good news. Good news. It won't be difficult at all to deal with it. Number 6, if people have doubt, they just doubt. They don't think it's going to work. They don't think that they can just so easily let go of anger, or that God's not going to take it, or whatever the doubts may be. That's pretty easy to handle too. Lord, I believe, help me overcome my disbelief. So if you doubt, of course it's not going to work. And lastly, they're not able to forgive themselves. I will talk more about that later as well. Okay. So these are the 7 major reasons. There are other reasons, but I find these 7 that happen quite frequently. Remember, you can't force a person to do something that they don't want to do. You have to ask them, do you want to be free? And don't force them. Don't force them. I remember a few years back, 3-4 years ago, my daughter was really struggling after my late wife had died, and I was on a trip to Taiwan. I came back and she was crying. I said, do you want me to help you? She said, no. Did I tell you guys this story? I might have told you the story already. But, basically the story was I tried to force her, and she said, Dad, don't force me. I've tried it all week long. She yelled at me and said, don't force me. Then you tell in your training, don't force people when they're not ready. I said, you're right. So I apologize. and I started loving her instead of forcing her. It never works if you force someone. They have to be willing to do it. Okay? Now, there's a couple of these things that I want to talk about before we practice. And these are the two main things that you will be doing when a person gets stuck. If it's too big, too deep, or too much, if they get stuck, how do you know when they get stuck? When you ask to give it to the Lord and you ask them, what do you sense, see, hear, or feel? Sometimes they say nothing. Sometimes they say no change. Sometimes they say, I don't know how I feel. If they give you those answers, that means they did not let it go. They didn't let the stone go. Because when they really let the stone go, they would say, I feel better. I feel more release. I feel more relief. I feel more peace. I feel more joy. There's a transformation that will take place. But if they said there's no change, and you ask, how do you feel? You say, I don't feel any different. There's no change. I have no feeling. That means they didn't let it go. Okay? So in that case, you know, I've already taught you this, but I wanted to emphasize it because when you pray for people, you will get some people who can't let go. You should say, do you want the Lord to help? They say yes, and say, Lord, I want to be free. Lord, will you help me? And Lord, with your help and power, I choose to give this anger or depression or hate or whatever it is to you. Okay? Also keep this in mind, because these stones have weight. For example, sometimes we combine fears. So we might combine 3 fears together and they can't let go of it because it's too much. You might need to break down the fears into 3 separate fears, or even in the negative emotions like disappointment, anger, hate, and fear. You might have to separate the hate and the fear because the hate is strong, the fear is strong. They might not be able to get rid of the hate and the fear at the same time. So the principle there, if it is too much, too deep, help make it smaller for them. And that will be easier. So that's number 2 here. Help make it smaller for them. Or you ask the Lord for help, because the Lord has the strength and the power to help them. Okay? So that's how you handle that. You will use this quite often. Quite often. The other thing that you will use quite often is the connecting stones. These are the 2 main things that you will use over and over again. If they get stuck and they can't let go of an anger, disappointment, or hate towards a person, find the connecting stones. Are there any fear? Are there any sin? Are there any guilt? Are there negative words? Did they put a curse on them? One of the sin that it's a little bit tricky, people don't think about it, is sometimes they judge the person. You know, the person hurt them and then they judge them. So that would be a sin when you judge people, and that sin of judging people can cause you not to be able to let go of the anger that you have towards the people. So, and when they fill out the form for you, or when they tell you these things, you can see how they're related. If they tell you they hate their father, and you see that in one of the columns, they say, I curse my father, I wish he was dead. So they talk about being hating the father, fearful of the father, and then a curse of wishing he was dead. They could be connected because it's related to the father. So these are some clues. Sometimes, you know, they could curse the father, but then the father, the negative words are held in the heart. Maybe the father said, you're just so stupid, you'll never amount to anything. So that could be as well, you know, some negative words there. All right, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense for you. All right, there are more, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. I'll talk about it after the practice because I only want to focus on these two major ones. If it's too big, too deep, if they can't let it go, ask the Lord for help. You might need to break it down to smaller pieces and find connecting stones. If they have a hard time letting go, look in the sheet, you know, that they filled out. Look at it. Is it connected to the same person? Do the sin, guilt, the fear, the negative words, the curse, you know, are they tied into any one person? They're connected to someone that they hate or they're angry with. And if you see the connectingness, the connecting stones, you might have to deal with the other stones first, or you deal with all as a cluster, as a group of stones. Okay, so these two, when it's too deep and when they're connecting, these are the two things that you will use almost 80% of the time. The rest of the sandbags that hold a hot air balloon down, those only happen quite infrequently. But these two items are the things that happen more often, almost 80% of the time. So that's why I'm going to stop here for right now. I'll explain the others later, but I'm going to stop here for now. And we are going to practice. Let me talk about the practice time. Let's give you some guidelines. I'm going to be dividing you into groups of twos or threes. Groups of twos or threes. You will have, if you have 3 people in your group, you will have 1 facilitator, 1 recipient, and 1 observer. So you, as a group, get to decide who wants to facilitate, who wants to receive, and who wants to observe and help as needed. If the person who's the recipient already has the 2 pages filled out, have them email that to the group, and you can use that to start out with. If they haven't filled it out, then you have to help ask the question to identify, the different columns in the 2 pages. Do they have any negative, any disappointment, anger, hate towards anyone? So you begin to write that down. What about the fears? You begin to check those up. What about the sin? So, you identify those, the occult, the curses, the negative words, okay, and then the root lies on the 2nd page. And if you get stuck, if they're not able to let go, ask the Lord for help, break it into smaller pieces if needed, or find the connecting stones and renounce them. Find the connecting stones and renounce them, okay? One other thing that I wanted to mention, if they have a hard time letting go of a fear, like if they have a fear of snake, for example, and they can't let go of it, ask them to go back to a memory in the past when they first had the fear of snake. And then you renounce that memory as well, that incident, along with the fear of snake, and it will go away. We saw that in our demonstration yesterday in the morning session. By the way, both demo from the morning and evening is now on our website. So if you only attended the nighttime session, which is this session, and you want to see another demonstration, the other demonstration was a lady that had been raped, and she got so much freedom. And today she prayed for someone else, and she prayed for another person, another lady, and that lady received so much healing today through the lady that got freed up from being raped. It was incredible. I have a bullet here about, what do you think would happen if sometimes they're not able to let go, and if they're not able to, you could ask them, what do you think would happen if you were able to let it go? And that could uncover a fear that they have. Well, if I let go, then they might hurt me again. Well, something along that line. So, it could uncover a fear that they didn't tell you. Okay? All righty, but please don't force a person when they're not ready to let it go. Don't tell them that God will take it. Don't tell them that if they do it, it'll be good for them. Don't force them. There's some reason. I give you one illustration, one true example. This man was so angry with his mother, and he couldn't let it go. So I asked him that question, what do you think would happen if you let go of the anger towards your mother? He said, I think I'm going to have a heart attack. Now, I'm not going to tell them, no, you won't have a heart attack. If you let it go, you'll be fine. No. Sometimes when a person thinks it and he really believes it, if he try to let it go, he may start having the symptom of having a heart attack. So don't force a person. You know, in that case, if he said, I think I could have a heart attack, I would take it to the Lord and say, Lord, is that true? If he let go, he would have a heart attack. In that man's case, I asked the Lord, and he said, I can't hear from the Lord. You know, he just wasn't ready to let it go. So I said, okay, well, we're not going to process that at this time because he wasn't ready. So don't force a person when they're not ready. Okay? All right. Now, I am going to unmute you. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. Let me rephrase that. Allow participant to unmute yourself. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask questions before we break into our groups. Any question that you have for me? Whoa, I'm surprised. I mean, you guys are pretty confident in this, right?
Not really. Yes, excuse me, Pastor. Just on softening the emotion, because if you realise that you're a person who's blocked emotion, and sometimes you don't know the stones, but you realise you might have blocked emotions for a while.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to talk about that later. By the way, during the practice, you have 3 people, and if the recipient, you find out that they can't feel much emotion and they already suppressed it and they blocked it, and when they think back, they can't think of anything, even though they say, well, I feel the hurt, but I don't remember and I can't think of it. That means they have suppressed it. And that's deeper than suppressing and rationalizing. There are different levels of suppression, and some gets very deep. And let me give you an example, because Mr. Carey asked about that. I worked with a young lady. She had been abused so many times. She was involved in sex trafficking and all of that. And because she was abused ever since she was like 4 years old, and she probably was forced to have sex with over 200 people, sold for sex and all these things. So even when she was a little kid, it was so hurtful, so fearful, that she started developing, she started disassociating. Instead of thinking about the abuse taking place, her mind just goes off into imaginary land with lots of animals and stuff like that. And she was just one of the animals, imaginary place. So she disassociated from the real memory and go to an imaginary world. And so, so that was one form of suppression that we had. So it was one form of suppression. And nowadays, in the present day, when she gets stressed, she would also disassociate. She just go to imaginary land. So there are other forms of suppression, and some people just don't remember at all. And if one of the recipient has that kind of issue, you would ask them if they're willing to feel again. Okay, but it's going to be very hard for them to feel again, very hard, because they already shut down the emotion because it was very hurtful, very fearful. And if they are to feel again, they're going to get all that bad feeling from the past, plus so much more, throughout their lives. Okay, that's why dealing with people who suppress their emotion is very difficult. But I'll give you more details on that. So Mr. Carey's question, if they can't even think about it, okay, try to see if they have any current memory or any recent memory that they've been angry with someone. Okay, deal with whatever they can feel, and especially more of the recent ones. And if they can't, because that's how they live their life, every time they get hurt, they suppress it and they shut it down. But those things don't get shut down forever. They keep coming back up when they get stirred up again. Okay, But if you have a recipient who shut down their emotion, then get another recipient. Don't deal with them at this time. Very difficult. Okay, any other question? Do you understand what the practice will look like? Okay, so choose a facilitator, a recipient. If they have the 2-page form already filled out, email it to the other 2 people. If by any chance you only have 2 people on your team, then choose one to be a facilitator and the other person to be the recipient. You are going to experience something really quite amazing. You will. Okay? All right. If there's no other question, I'm going to break you up into groups of 3s. Okay, I assume there's no other question. Okay. All right, like last time, I'm going to be visiting different groups and see how you guys are doing. If we have any issue with people not being assigned to a group because sometimes Zoom gets messed up, I will try to, manually add you to the group, okay? So if you have a couple of people and all of a sudden a new person appears, it's because we had some technical issues. All righty, here we go. Let me see. Okay, you can join your groups. The other person didn't join your group. I'm gonna move you to a different group. Okay. Hello, Chua, Janice. Hey, did you get out of the group? Did you get out of the group? What happened?
Yeah, my mic doesn't work.
Okay.
So maybe I needed to restart Zoom. So would you tell
Okay.
My room was 1.
One. Okay,
So
I'll
they
tell them.
can start.
Okay.
Yeah. Later.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Kate's having some technical issue and she's going to try to log on another way and I'll try to add her back to this group once we get all that in place.
Sure, sure, no problem.
Okay, welcome everyone back. Let me see, go back to the previous slide there. I was able to visit a few rooms and you all had seemed like some of you had some good testimonies. If you were not able to finish, but you were able to get the emails and contact information and you want to continue that, you're welcome to do that. So just make sure that you get the emails and contacts, and you know, some of the groups are doing that. They made some progress and they didn't finish and they want to continue. Let's see, do you have any testimony that you would like to share? Anyone has a testimony that they would like to share? Let me make sure that you are able to unmute yourself. Yep, you're able to unmute yourself. Any testimony from your group?
Lou, you want to go ahead?
Okay. Kim prayed for me, and we did. She prayed for my physical healing, and I can feel heat in my hands because I have arthritis, and I can feel this warm going around my hands as she was praying for me.
Wonderful. So were you able to receive some of the emotional release?
Yes. I was the 60%. Mine was easy to let go.
Yours was pretty easy to let go. And how did you feel with all of that?
I felt every step of the way, God showed me something different, so for me, God was showing me images of Him and not really speaking, but just showing me images of my healing.
More like visions.
Yes.
Wonderful. How did all that make you feel?
I feel more joy. Yes.
Wonderful. And then Miss Kim also prayed for some physical healing, and you also experienced that as well.
Yes.
Excellent. One of the teaching that I do is on physical healing, and it's the easiest training that I do. It only takes, I don't know whether it's 1 or 2 sessions in online, but it's very quick. We probably can do it in just 1 online session. That's something that I plan on doing in the near future. Okay. Well, that is a great testimony. She was in the 60%. Now, I did notice that one of the group, we had a recipient, Miss Guy had volunteered, and Miss Guy, when I prayed for her, she was in the 30%. It was a little bit more challenging. She was more in the medium range. So Miss Lou is in the 60%. It's very easy to let go. Miss Guy, it took some work. And do anyone else has any testimony or any question?
Yeah, no, I was able to release a lot of stuff in the area of sexual abuse and discipline and things like that. But it didn't sort of reveal in my emotions until I, wrote it down and spoke it out, and then got challenged in it, and then the emotion got released.
That's so wonderful, Mr. Kim. I was in a similar situation. When I started the journey of emotional healing, I went to another ministry. It actually took me 6 2-hour session, 12 hours before I can start feeling anything. So it was a lot easier for you.
Mm.
So praise God.
Mm.
Praise God.
Because, you know, I did hear you a little bit earlier and you were having trouble feeling the emotion.
Yes.
But when you went back to the memory, you were able to feel it, and that helped a lot.
Yes.
And then after you were able to feel it, you were able to release it, and things changed after that.
That's right. Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Do keep this in mind. If you're someone that has shut down the emotion and you're starting to learn how to feel again, it is possible that in the days ahead, you might get other negative emotions that come. And then, you know, you're going to be tempted to say, see, this thing doesn't work. I feel really bad right now. That's not the case. If you've shut down your emotions before and you start feeling again, maybe not all the negative emotions will come back at one time. It can come a few days later. And if that's the case, Mr. Carey, you either can contact your group or you can contact me, and we will get you freed up if you're not able to release it yourself. You might have to go through that a few times. Eventually, you know, those major things will be gone. Okay? So if you experience something like that, keep that in mind, please.
Thank you.
Because I did work with the lady and who shut down her emotion, and she felt, at first she couldn't feel anything. I came back to Houston, I worked with her again, and then she started getting some breakthrough. A few days later, she stopped feeling really bad. She called me, she texted me, she WhatsApped me. I said, well, let's pray for you right away. And we did. She felt better. A few days later, she did it again. She said, it's even worse than before. I said, no, let's get rid of it. We got rid of it. And then a few days later, she texted again. It's really bad. I said, okay. Eventually, all of that's gone, and she is so free now.
Mm.
So keep that in mind when you work with someone who has trouble feeling. Okay. Any other testimonial question?
Pastor Simeon, this Gilda, I have two questions for you.
Yes.
One, as we were going through the fears, when it got to, I had a question about how with negative emotions, when we renounce them, we say why we have the emotion. When we talk about fear, for example, when we renounce fear of the future, why do we not say why we have that fear, that particular fear, and we just renounce it and then forgive ourselves? Why do we not include because in that prayer as well?
Miss Gilda, you're the first person to ever ask that question.
You know, it felt as I was with Carrie, and as he was praying through it, I really felt that part of his freedom was going to come in addressing the why behind that fear and lumping all of that like he did the emotion. That's why I asked. That's why I'm asking.
Yes, it's actually a really, really good question. The reason I don't suggest doing it is because for majority of the people, it's not needed.
Okay.
People, usually, here's the difference. When they're angry at a person, they can be angry at a person for a lot of different reasons. So you got all of these little stones of anger that you collected all throughout. The fear is usually more specific, and most of the fear is more specific. And so when they talk about the fear of snake, the fear of not having enough money, even the fear of future, it's more specific. And in most cases, majority of the cases that you work with, it's not needed unless they have trouble getting rid of it. If they have trouble getting rid of the fear, then we go back to the incident. Okay, and that's what I mentioned. So this way it makes it a lot quicker and easier, because otherwise you said, well, I renounced the fear of the future because I renounced the fear of not having, finance because, and it just takes much more time. So if you notice in this training, what I try to do is, as long as it's not needed and it saves you time and they still get the freedom, then it makes it it takes less time and it's as effective or more effective, then that's what I want to recommend. And if they get stuck, then you go back to the incident and renounce the
Okay.
incident. Okay?
Okay, and then that reminded me of the demonstration that you did yesterday about the fear of snakes.
Right.
You had a difficult time and you had her go back to the memory, and then you incorporated the memory in the prayer and she got freedom.
Right.
So I see what you're saying. Yeah, I got it now. I got it now. I just had to remember it. I have another question, if I may,
Sure.
for sins or sinned against. It was the possibility of sexual abuse having been done to him, but the prayer, it renounces the sexual abuse of, it doesn't have to be that someone, I don't have to be praying it that I committed it.
No.
I can also be praying it that it was done to me.
Yes, or just renounce that incident, the time when I was abused.
Or renounce okay, got it. Okay.
Okay?
I just needed to hear myself ask you those questions.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you.
And so, I'm so excited. These things, Miss Lou's testimony, it was really powerful. I forgot to ask her whether, she could hear from the Lord so easily before, but now she's hearing from the Lord quite easily. The Lord also healed her hands that she had trouble feeling before. And so I have more good news for you. The physical healing portion, a lot of it comes with the emotional healing. And you will, if you sign up for the physical healing training, and it's going to be very easy, very quick, and it's going to be, you'll be surprised. So I'm just sharing that, I'll do that training in the near future. All right. Any other question? Any other testimony?
I just want to, this is Ewan. I just want to share that when I was doing it with Tina in the beginning, she was nervous and she was very emotional. But after getting rid of some stones, she managed to start smiling and laughing. It was really, really sweet. Yeah, very positive.
Yes. As a facilitator, when you see the lives of people being transformed before your very eyes, it is so encouraging.
Yeah.
And, I see this all the time. And I don't focus on the negative things that they talk about, because every one of us has some negative things. And so I don't focus on the negative thing. I focus on what God is going to release. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because, it's so amazing to see what God is doing. I want you to understand this is not just about getting emotional healing. This is releasing a person to start walking in the kingdom. They have more righteousness, more peace, more joy, more love, more power in their lives so that God can use them to do even greater things for Jesus. It makes everything else easier. It makes better relationship with spouse and children and life and discipleship and raising up leaders, that the kingdom of God can be expanded and advanced quite forcefully, for the Lord. Okay, I just have a couple more slides to show you and we are done for tonight. Let me see.
Pastor, I want to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
This is my experience that I'm very encouraged that my Lou is in a 60% easy, so I'm very encouraged. In the beginning, I wasn't.
You were a little bit nervous, right?
Very encouraged, yeah. I thank you for that, for your training.
Was Lou the first person that you prayed with?
Well, in this group, yeah.
Yes.
I did it outside, but in this group, I think I did.
Yes. So, sometimes it's really hard when you're practicing. You don't know if you're going to get the 60%, the 30%, or the less than 10%.
Yeah.
The less than 10%, It is so hard. You're working with them and they don't get any breakthrough at all. And you just keep,
I will be very sad.
yes, it's very, very difficult. But when you get people in the 60% like Lou, and she just let it go, and it's just like, so go, and she's happy, and she's say, I experiencing God, I see God, I'm so joyful. You're like, oh, this is so easy.
I was wishing that I'm in her position. I want to experience what she experienced.
Yes, yes, but not, you know, but you're in the 30%. It's better there than in that 10% that can't give up anything, Miss Kia. So, so the thing is, you don't know where the person falls until you start praying with them. You really don't know. You don't know where you fall until you start doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So I wish everybody was in that 60% becomes 100%. Okay, I'm going to finish up. I'll take just a few more minutes and I want to finish just a couple more slides.
Can I say something?
Yes, Miss Sheila?
Sorry. Oh, don't worry, I'll talk next week.
Okay, all right. Now, one of the things that they can't forgive themselves, this doesn't happen too often, but if they can't forgive themselves, they say, okay, the Lord forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. Okay, then I would let them know, do you know that that is a sin because you're putting yourself ahead of God? If God forgives you and you can't forgive yourself, are you willing to ask God to forgive you for that? Because that is a sin. Most of the time they say yes, and just say, Lord, forgive me for putting myself ahead of you. And then you go back to the prayer and give it to the Lord. Lord, forgive me. I forgive myself, and I give this to you. Okay? So that works usually pretty well. I want to get back to suppressing the emotion. That's, you know, a lot of the people in that 10% are those people who suppress their emotion. They just can't feel. There are different levels of suppressing emotion. Some, you can get them to feel the emotion quite easily, but some are a lot deeper. It's much harder for them to feel. We talked about the people who rationalize. If they rationalize, just say, you're rationalizing, and I can understand why you do that. But if you want freedom, go back to how you were feeling before you start making those logical conclusions. Okay? And once they can feel again, they can let go. So that group of people is not hard to work with. Now, when they have deeper suppression, and there are many different ways of deeper suppression. I did mention about someone who disassociate from the real memory and they go to a imaginary memory. I also prayed for one lady. She had so much hurt, but then, you know, she went from her memory to seeing herself as a little girl in a white dress dancing in a field of flowers because her mind couldn't handle the stress from the hurt and the fear from the hurtful memory. That's why people sometimes have fragmented memories. You know, it's all over the place, it's broken. Sometimes they cannot feel anything even within the memory, or sometimes they even can't remember the memories. I remember praying for one pastor. I had another pastor sitting with me. He shared with me about how angry he was with this person. And I said, are you ready to give it? And I said, let's gather the anger. And he said, what anger? And I said, the anger towards your I forgot who it was, your mom or somebody. He said, I'm not angry for my mom. And the other pastor that was sitting, he was like, you told us you were angry with your mom and you told us why. He said, no, I don't remember that. He couldn't even remember what he told us. It was just like completely gone. So needless to say, he didn't get any healing. So the group of people there, it's more challenging. For those who disassociate, actually, it's not that hard to work with them as long as they're willing to stop the disassociation. I worked with some people who are willing to stop disassociating. We just renounce it and they stopped doing it and they got freed up. And then there are others who did not stop. You know, they kept disassociating because they were so used to it and they didn't get freedom from it. So the deeper suppression ones are harder to work with. Why would a person suppress their emotion? Because of the greater hurt and pain in their lives. It's just like a power surge. You know, when you have lightning and thunder, and lightning hit a transformer, and then your power goes out, it tripped the breaker in your house because of a power surge. A person has so much fear, that fear acts like a great power surge, and poof, the breaker in our emotional mind just turns off. Yeah, because it was just too much. We can't handle it. The problem is that usually a person who shut down the emotion will shut it down when they're a little child, but then they collect more hurt, more fear throughout their lives. So if you ask them to feel again, very difficult for them to do, because initially it was already very painful and they collected so much more. And if they're going to turn it back on, oh my, so difficult. That's why it is so hard working with that group. Very difficult. However, if they're willing to turn it back on, it's just a simple prayer. Lord, forgive me for turning off my emotion, my feeling. I want it back on. Help me. And they just turn it back on. The thing is, if they turn it back on, be willing to work with them. Be willing to work with them, because they can be feeling bad. They feel better after they get rid of it, but a few days later, they can feel bad, or they can even feel worse. Make sure you're willing to work with them for a few weeks until you get all of these things out, because when they turn it back on, maybe not all negative emotion come back at one time. It might come back, you know, several different times. So please, if you are going to work with those deeper issues, keep this thing in mind, and I am always a resource. Okay, well, that concludes our training for tonight. Just thank you so much. Session 7 will not be practiced. I haven't updated session 7 yet. Session 7, we are going to do spiritual deliverance. It's going to be so easy. We're going to deal with even deeper problems that people have, and you will be surprised at how easy it will be to help people with deeper issues if you understand the principle. And I will explain all of that next week. We're not meeting again this week. We start again on Monday morning, 8 a.m. and then 8 p.m., which will be your Tuesday morning if you live in Asia. Okay? And,
Or New Zealand.
and then in New Zealand, I think it might be Tuesday. I don't remember New Zealand time. So
Tuesday, 1 o'clock.
Tuesday, 1 o'clock. All right. So, Father, we thank you so much for tonight and for the amazing testimonies that you've already released. But, Lord, this is only the beginning, because you desire for your kingdom to be advanced forcefully, and you want to use your church. You want to raise us up. You not only want us to be healed up, but you want us to walk in your kingdom so that we might live it, so that we might advance it, because Lord, it's all about you, and we give you glory and honor for it in Jesus' precious name.
Amen.
Thank you,
Amen.
Pastor.
Thank you, Pastor Simeon.
Much.
Thank you, Pastor Simeon.